The great hall of the alien court was alive with shining lights and strange music. Columns of silver rose into the sky, and banners of glowing fabric moved like waves in the air. Aliens with sharp faces, tall horns, and skin that shimmered in colors sat in silence, waiting for the princess to arrive. Captain James walked into the hall, his boots echoing on the crystal floor. He was the first human ever allowed in this court, and every eye was fixed on him. He tried to stand tall, but his heart pounded like a drum. He knew that one wrong move could mean danger. The princess entered, her steps light but full of authority. Her long hair glowed like starlight, and her silver crown reflected the fire of the hall lamps. The crowd rose at once, bowing deeply. James, however, did not know their customs. He only gave a small nod, thinking it was enough. Gasps filled the air, sharp and sudden. Every alien in the hall stared in horror. To nod was an insult, a gesture reserved only for servants. The princess stopped walking, her eyes burning like fire. James felt the change in the air, but did not yet understand it. The silence was heavy, almost painful. The alien guards tightened their grips on their weapons, and the music died. He cleared his throat nervously, unaware of what he had done. "You dare!" The princess's voice echoed, sharp like a blade. James blinked, confused. I mean no disrespect," he said carefully. But the words were too late. The offense was already carved into the moment. The council of elders, sitting at the edge of the hall, leaned toward each other, whispering quickly. One of them, an old alien with skin like dark steel, rose and spoke. "By the ancient law, the insult to the royal blood cannot be ignored." The hall shook with the weight of his words. James felt cold rise up his spine. "What law?" he asked, his voice almost breaking. The princess took a step closer, her eyes locked on his. Her lips curved into a smile, not of kindness, but of challenge. "The law of binding," she said slowly, letting each word strike like thunder. James looked around, lost. "What does that mean?" he whispered. The elder raised his hand for silence. "It means," he said, "that the one who insults the princess must pay with his life or his bond." A gasp of or rolled through the hall. The aliens shouted in agreement, their voices rising like a storm. James's breath caught in his throat. "Bond? What kind of bond?" The elder's eyes gleamed. "You must become her mate," he declared. The words struck James like a blade. He staggered back, shaking his head. "This is madness. I didn't know your customs." The guards stepped forward, their weapons glowing. "Refusal means death," the elder warned. The princess tilted her head, studying James. Her anger was still there, but behind it was something else, something unreadable. "You have offended me, human," she said, her voice calm but heavy with power. "And by our law, you now belong to me." James's chest tightened. He wanted to fight back, to protest, but the sea of alien faces glared at him, and the sharp points of the guards' spears left no choice. The hall trembled with tension, and his mind raced. How had everything gone so wrong? He had come as an explorer, a guest. Now he was trapped by a law older than human history. He looked at the princess, her eyes still locked on him. He felt both fear and something else, an energy he couldn't explain. The elder raised his staff, striking it against the floor. "It is decided," he said. "The human will face the path of trials to prove if he is worthy of the princess's bond." James's heart pounded harder. Trials? What kind of trials? He wanted answers, but no one offered them. The guards closed in, surrounding him. The princess finally turned away, walking back to her throne. Her smile was sharp, almost cruel. The hall erupted in chants, the aliens calling out the old songs of law and fate. James stood frozen in the center of it all, his future rewritten in a single mistake. He clenched his fists, knowing that whatever was coming, he would have to survive it. The princess sat on her throne, her eyes never leaving him. "You have offended me, human," she repeated. "But perhaps fate has plans even greater than law." The hall fell into silence again. James's fate was sealed. The first step of a dangerous path had begun. The hall remained silent after the elder's words. James felt as if the ground under his boots had vanished. He was an explorer, a visitor, not a prisoner, and yet the air around him pressed like a cage. The princess sat on her throne, her sharp eyes fixed on him. Every movement of hers carried power, grace, and danger. James could not tell if she hated him, or if she enjoyed the strange game that had begun. The elder raised his staff again, his voice deep and steady. "Human, you have committed offense against the crown. By the law of binding, there are only two paths, death or union with the princess." The crowd shouted in agreement, their voices echoing through the shining walls. James's throat went dry. He opened his mouth to protest. "I didn't mean it. I didn't know your customs." But his words were swallowed by laughter from the alien council. One of them leaned forward, his eyes glowing green. "Ignorance is not protection, human. The law is older than stars, older than your fragile world." The princess leaned forward slightly, her silver crown glowing under the hall lamps. "Do you think you can insult me and walk free?" she asked, her voice calm but heavy. James swallowed hard. Her tone was not anger alone. It was command. It was fate pressing down. "I can't marry someone I just met." James tried again. The aliens around him laughed, some with mocking smiles. One warrior shouted, "He fears the bond." Another hissed, "Then let him taste death." The elder silenced them with a wave of his staff. "Enough. There is one chance for this human. The path of trials." James blinked. "What trials?" The elder's eyes narrowed. "3 tests of strength, mind, and heart. If you pass, you will be worthy of the bond. If you fail, your death will honor the princess." The hall filled with cheers. Drums began to beat, slow and heavy, as if the law itself was alive. James felt sweat roll down his neck. Strength? Mind? Heart? What kind of challenges could these creatures create? The princess rose from her throne and walked toward him. Her presence alone made the guards step aside. She stood close, only a breath away. Her voice was soft, but her words pierced like blades. "You are weak, human," she said. "Your body is fragile, your mind untested, your heart unknown. If you survive the trials, perhaps you are more than you appear. If you fail, then your blood will mark the law complete." James wanted to shout back, wanted to fight her words. But when he looked into her eyes, he felt something he couldn't name. Not just anger, not just cruelty, there was curiosity, and beneath it, the faint spark of respect. The guards closed in again, their armor glowing with strange energy. One of them pointed toward a massive door at the side of the hall. "The arena waits," he said, his voice deep and cold. James was pushed forward. The crowd followed, chanting the songs of the old law. Their voices rose like thunder. The entire palace seemed alive, eager to see his fate. As he walked, James tried to control his breathing. He had faced storms, battles, and hostile worlds before, but nothing had prepared him for this. A trial for his life and a forced bond with an alien princess. He whispered to himself, "I need to survive. I need to find a way out." The doors opened, and the sound of the crowd grew louder. James stepped into the vast arena. The ground was made of black stone, cracked from battles long past. Above him, towers of silver held up the sky. Thousands of aliens filled the stands, their eyes glowing in the light of strange torches. At the far end of the arena, the princess stood again, her throne now high above the battlefield. She looked down at him, her face unreadable. The elder's voice thundered through the arena. The first trial begins. The trial of beasts. The gates on both sides of the arena rumbled. Chains broke, and the sound of roaring beasts filled the air. James's stomach twisted as shadows moved inside the cages. The crowd screamed with excitement, stomping their feet. He had no weapon, no shield, only his bare hands and his human will. He took a deep breath, eyes locked on the gates. His mind raced with plans, with memories of survival. He would not die here, not as a victim of a mistake. The gates burst open, and monstrous shapes leapt into the arena. Creatures with burning eyes, sharp fangs, and scales that glimmered like metal. The ground shook as they charged. The trial had begun. James tightened his fists, his heart racing. He was a human, fragile in their eyes. But he would prove that humanity was more than weakness. The princess leaned forward, her lips curved into the faintest smile. She whispered to herself, unheard by the crowd, "Let us see what you truly are, human." And so, the trial of beasts began. James stood alone, facing monsters, the princess's eyes on him. And the fate of his life, and perhaps the fate of two worlds, rested on his survival. The ground shook as the cages opened. The beasts charged forward, their roars rolling through the arena like thunder. They were not like animals from Earth. Their bodies were built from scales and bone, their teeth curved like knives, and their glowing eyes burned with alien fire. James froze for a single heartbeat. The sight was overwhelming. The crowd cheered, believing the human would die within seconds. The princess leaned forward in her high throne, her silver crown catching the torchlight. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. This was her law, her stage, her trial. James's mind raced. He had no weapon, no armor, only his instincts. Running was impossible. Fighting head-on was madness. But survival had always been the strength of humans. He whispered under his breath, "Think, don't panic, think." The first beast lunged, a creature twice his size with claws that ripped into the black stone floor. James rolled to the side, barely escaping the strike. The crowd hissed, disappointed that the kill was not instant. The beast turned, snarling, drool sizzling as it hit the hot stone. James grabbed a broken piece of rock from the ground. It was sharp enough to cut his palm. Not much, but better than nothing. The beast leapt again, and James drove the rock into its eye. The creature screamed, rearing back, blood like molten silver spilling to the floor. The crowd gasped. A fragile human had drawn blood from their sacred beast. The princess's eyes narrowed. Her anger faded, replaced by something else, curiosity. Two more beasts burst forward, their bodies moving like shadows. One swung its tail, striking James in the chest. He crashed against the stone wall, his lungs burning. Pain ripped through his ribs, but he forced himself to stand. The crowd cheered again, but this time their tone was different. They were no longer laughing, they were watching. The human did not die. The human fought. James's vision blurred for a moment. The beasts circled him, their claws scraping the stone. He noticed cracks in the floor where the creature's weight pressed down. His mind clicked into action. If he could not kill them with strength, he would use the arena itself. When the first beast lunged again, James dodged toward one of the cracks. The creature's massive body landed hard. The stone broke beneath it, trapping its leg for a moment. James rushed forward, driving the broken rock again and again into its throat. The beast thrashed, blood pouring, then fell silent. The arena shook with roars of surprise. Aliens shouted, some in anger, some in awe. The elder's eyes widened. No outsider had ever killed two beasts. The princess leaned back in her throne, her gaze locked on James. She whispered to herself, "He refuses to die." But there was no time to rest. The last beast towered above them all. It had wings of bone and skin, and its scream rattled the air. The ground trembled as it spread its wings. The crowd fell silent, waiting for the kill. James staggered, his body screaming with pain. His hand dripped with blood from his wounds. He had no weapon left, no strength to match this monster. But he refused to fall. He forced his mind to focus. There has to be a way, he thought. His eyes darted around the arena. Torches burned high above. Ropes held the gates in place. If he could not kill the beast directly, maybe he could bring something down on it. The winged creature leapt, its massive body flying through the air. James ran toward the center, his lungs burning. The beast swooped low, claws scraping the floor. At the last second, James dove to the side. The creature's body smashed into one of the support pillars, cracking it. Dust rained down, the arena shook. The crowd roared, chanting louder and louder. The princess stood, her eyes flashing with fire. She could not believe what she was seeing, this human turning death into strategy. The beast turned again, rage in its glowing eyes. James waited, his body trembling. He lured it once more, running past the cracked pillar. The creature dove, claws ready to tear him apart. At the last moment, James rolled. The beast slammed into the pillar, breaking it completely. The tower above groaned, then collapsed. Stone and fire crashed down onto the monster, burying it under tons of rubble. The arena went silent. The dust rose high, blocking the torches. James lay on the ground, coughing, his chest on fire with pain. Slowly, the dust cleared, and the corpse of the beast was revealed under the broken stone. The silence broke into thunder. The crowd screamed, stamping their feet, chanting louder than before. No human had ever done this. No outsider had ever survived the beasts. James, bloody and exhausted, stood on shaking legs. He raised his hand, not in victory, but in defiance. He was alive. The elder stood, his voice echoing. The first trial is complete. The human lives. The princess looked down at him, her lips pressed tight. Her eyes glowed with something James had not seen before. Respect. She whispered so softly only she could hear. Perhaps you are not as weak as I believed. James collapsed to one knee, his strength nearly gone. But inside, a fire burned. He had survived the first trial. 2 more remained. And though the crowd saw only a human on the edge of collapse, the princess saw something else. A man who refused to bow. The arena floor was still cracked and stained with silver blood when the elder raised his staff again. The crowd slowly fell silent, waiting for his words. James knelt on one knee, his chest heaving, his body aching from the battle with the beasts. But he was alive, and that fact alone unsettled the aliens who had expected his death. The elder's voice rolled like thunder. The first trial is complete. The human has shown strength. Now begins the second, the trial of mind. The crowd gasped and murmured, their voices sharp with anticipation. Some shouted, "He cannot pass this. His kind are simple." Others hissed, "The beasts were one thing, but no human can master the puzzle of eternity." James wiped blood from his lip, confused. "Trial of mind," he muttered. His body wanted rest, but his spirit refused to bow. The princess stood from her throne, her long gown flowing like liquid silver. She stepped closer to the edge, her voice cold yet calm. "The trial of mind will decide if you are more than muscle and luck. Human, it will test your reason, your focus, and your will. Fail, and your life ends. Succeed, and you take one step closer to me." Her words struck James like fire. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was about proving humanity itself. Guards moved forward and led him to a chamber beneath the arena. The torches here burned blue, their smoke curling like snakes along the stone ceiling. At the center of the chamber stood a massive device. It looked like a cube of floating stone, its sides shifting endlessly. Symbols glowed across it, spirals, stars, and lines of alien script. The elder pointed his staff at the puzzle. "This is the eternal cube. It has stood unsolved by outsiders for 1,000 years. To align, it is to show mastery of thought. To fail is to be crushed under its weight." The cube rotated slowly, its pieces sliding in and out like a living machine. James stared at it, his stomach tight. He had faced claws and teeth, but now he faced silence. A silence that could kill him all the same. The guard stepped back, and the elder spoke again. "The rules are simple. Bring the patterns into harmony. Only then will the cube release its light. If you make too many mistakes, it will collapse on you." The crowd above roared as screens of light projected the puzzle into the arena for all to see. Every alien leaned forward, eager to watch the human's failure. The princess crossed her arms, her expression calm. But her eyes never left James. James touched the surface of the cube. It felt warm, alive, as if it was breathing under his hand. The symbols pulsed with energy, shifting whenever he moved one piece. He realized quickly that this was not just a puzzle of logic. It was alive. It was testing him, reacting to him. He muttered under his breath, "Like chess, but the board hates me." The first move came easy. He aligned two glowing stars, and the cube hummed softly. The crowd jeered, "Luck." Nothing more. James ignored them, focusing on the patterns. Every time he shifted one side, three others changed. It was like untangling a knot that tightened with every pull. But James remembered his training. He remembered the long nights aboard his ship, repairing systems with limited tools. The patience, the problem-solving, it was the same skill, just on a grander stage. Minutes passed, sweat dripping down his face. The cube resisted, shifting harder, symbols flashing angrily. The elder muttered, "He will fail soon." But James pushed back with focus. He slowed his breathing, blocked out the noise. Piece by piece, he brought order to the chaos. The princess leaned forward now, her lips parting slightly. She could see something the others did not: his calm under pressure, his refusal to break. The cube suddenly roared, the pieces breaking apart, hovering in the air like shards of stone. The crowd gasped. If James made the wrong move now, the pieces would fall and crush him. His hand shook, but his eyes stayed sharp. He remembered a principle he had learned long ago. When a system seems impossible, look for balance, not control. Instead of fighting the pieces, James moved them in rhythm. He treated the cube not like an enemy, but like a partner. Slowly, the symbols aligned, forming a single glowing circle. The cube hummed louder, then locked together, shining with golden light. The chamber shook, the walls glowing with ancient energy. The elder dropped his staff in shock. The crowd roared, their voices a storm. Some shouted in disbelief, "Impossible! No human could do this." Others chanted his name, their respect unwilling but undeniable. The princess's eyes widened, her calm mask breaking for a moment. She whispered, "He solved it." Then her lips curved into a smile, not of cruelty, but of intrigue. James collapsed back against the wall, his chest rising and falling. He had beaten the trial of mind. The elder announced loudly, his voice unsteady, "The human has passed. The law continues." The crowd screamed louder than ever, their voices split between anger and awe. James stood slowly, his body trembling, but his spirit burning. He looked up at the princess, meeting her gaze. And for the first time, she did not look at him with hatred. She looked at him with respect. But respect was not safety. There was one trial left, the most dangerous of all, the trial of heart. And as James was led back toward the arena, he knew this last test would not measure strength or mind. It would measure something far deeper, something that could change not only his fate, but hers. The arena was alive with noise. Drums pounded like thunder, voices rose in chants, and the firelight painted the stone walls with shadows. James stood in the center, his body weak, his mind heavy, but his spirit still unbroken. He had faced beasts. He had solved the living puzzle, yet the hardest part still waited. The elder raised his staff high. The third and final trial begins. The trial of heart. The crowd grew silent, the words rolling through the air like a storm cloud. Aliens leaned forward, waiting for the test that decided fate. The princess sat on her throne, her silver crown shining, her expression unreadable. But her eyes locked onto James with an intensity sharper than any blade. James whispered to himself, "Strength, mind, now heart." What do they mean by heart? The elder spoke again, his voice deep and grave. The trial of heart is not about force or wit. It is about choice, sacrifice, and the truth of one's spirit. To pass, the human must show courage beyond fear, compassion beyond reason. James's chest tightened. He had fought monsters, solved impossible puzzles. But sacrifice? Compassion? That was not about winning. It was about losing something to prove who you were. The guards brought forward two figures into the arena. James's eyes widened in shock. One was a small alien child, trembling, its big golden eyes filled with tears. The other was a captured human explorer, someone from his own crew. They had been taken without his knowledge, bound and weak. The elder raised his staff toward James. Choose. Save the child of our people, or save your own kind. One shall live, one shall die. Your choice will reveal your heart. The crowd roared in approval, chanting for blood. Some screamed, let him save his own, prove his selfish nature. Others shouted, he must choose the child, or prove unworthy of the princess. James's heart pounded. This was no simple trial. This was a trap. Whatever he chose, one life would end, and the judgment of the arena would weigh upon him forever. He stepped forward, his fist tight. The alien child whimpered, small and fragile. The human crewman looked at him desperately, whispering, James, don't let me die. The princess leaned forward slightly, her eyes sharp. She wanted to see his choice. Would he protect his own kind, or would he show loyalty to hers? James closed his eyes for a moment, his thoughts racing. If he chose his crewman, the aliens would see humans as selfish, unworthy. If he chose the alien child, his own man would die. Either way, he would lose something. The elder's voice thundered. Decide now, human. The arena waits for no one. James took a deep breath. His voice rang out, strong despite his pain. No. The crowd gasped. The elder frowned. What do you mean? James looked at the child, then at his crewman. I will not choose who lives and who dies. If this is the trial of heart, then hear me. A true heart does not abandon the innocent, and a true heart does not betray his own. He turned to the princess, his eyes fierce. You want to test my heart? Then know this. I will save them both, or I will die trying. The arena exploded with noise. Some shouted in fury, others in awe. The princess's eyes widened, her calm mask breaking for the first time. She whispered both. The gates opened, and danger filled the arena again. Two monstrous machines emerged, their blades spinning, their weapons glowing. The trial was clear. James could not simply speak. He had to act. The machines were programmed to kill both prisoners unless he intervened. James ran forward, his body screaming with pain. He dove toward the first machine as it raised its blade toward the child. With a roar, he slammed a broken chain into its gears, jamming the weapon. Sparks flew, the machine shrieked. The child crawled free, safe. The crowd erupted. Some shouted in disbelief. He saved the child, but the second machine turned its glowing eyes toward his crewman. James staggered, his legs trembling. He had nothing left, no weapons, no strength. Yet he forced himself forward. He threw his body against the machine, dragging its aim away from the prisoner. The blade cut deep across his side, blood pouring. But in the same moment, he drove the broken stone shard into the machine's eye. It shuddered, sparked, and collapsed. The human crewman crawled free, alive. James fell to his knees, his vision fading. The arena roared louder than ever before. The elder's eyes were wide with shock. The princess stood slowly, her lips parting. He saved them both, she whispered. Her voice carried across the silence that fell over the crowd. He risked his life for two worlds. His heart is true. James collapsed to the ground, blood staining the black stone. But a faint smile touched his lips. He had passed the trial of heart, not by choosing one life, but by refusing the trap, by saving both. The elder lowered his staff slowly, bowing his head. The law is complete. The human has passed all trials. The crowd shouted, some in rage, some in awe, but none could deny what they had seen. The princess looked down at him, her expression softening for the first time, and in her eyes, James saw not anger, not mockery, but respect, perhaps even something more. The arena was filled with thunder. The sound of the crowd was like a storm breaking across the galaxy. Some shouted in disbelief, others in awe, but no one could ignore what they had seen. A fragile human had passed all three trials: strength, mind, and heart. James lay on the cold stone floor, his chest rising and falling with ragged breaths. Blood stained his side, pain burned through every nerve, but his spirit refused to break. He had faced monsters, puzzles, and impossible choices, and he was still alive. The elder stepped forward, his staff glowing faintly in the firelight. His voice carried through the silence. The law is complete. The human has passed the trials. By the will of the ancients, he is now bound to the princess. Gasps filled the air. Some aliens cheered, believing the law had been honored. Others hissed with fury, unable to accept that a human was worthy of their crown. James forced himself to rise, trembling on weak legs. He looked up at the throne where the princess sat. Her silver crown gleamed, her eyes sharp as ever. But for the first time, they did not look at him with hatred. There was respect there, and something deeper, something hidden even from her own people. The princess stood slowly, and the hall grew silent again. Her gown shimmered like liquid metal as she descended the steps. Every step echoed like a drumbeat of fate. She stopped before James, her gaze locked on him. Her voice was calm, but heavy with power. "You came as nothing, human, weak, foolish, ignorant of our ways. You insulted me, and by our law, you should have died." The crowd nodded, their faces hard, waiting for her judgment. James stood tall, despite the pain in his body. He met her eyes without fear. He had earned the right to stand. The princess continued, her words slow and deliberate. "But you did not die. You faced the beasts with courage. You solved the cube with patience. You risked your life for both your kind and mine. You showed strength and heart." The elder bowed his head, whispering, "So it is written, so it must be." The princess turned to the crowd, her voice rising. "By the law of binding, this human is no longer an outsider. He is mine. He is my chosen mate." The arena erupted in chaos. Some aliens shouted with joy, others screamed with rage. Weapons clashed against shields as the crowd split in opinion. But no one could deny the law. The trials had been passed. James's heart pounded. Mate? Husband? Bound by law to a princess of another world? This was not what he had planned when he set foot on this planet. He whispered under his breath, "What have I walked into?" The princess looked back at him, her voice lower now, meant only for him. "You may not understand this, human, but fate has written our bond. From this day forward, you stand not as my enemy, but as my equal." James blinked, stunned by the word equal. He had expected mockery, chains, or cold ownership. Instead, she spoke with recognition, with respect. But even as she declared it, danger stirred. From the far side of the arena, a group of armored warriors stepped forward. Their voices rose in defiance. "No law binds us to a human. He is unworthy. We will not bow to him." The elder struck his staff, his voice booming. "Silence. The law is older than your pride, older than your rebellion." But the warriors raised their weapons anyway. The crowd gasped as steel and fire filled the air. The princess turned sharply, her eyes flashing with fury. "You dare defy the ancient law?" James staggered, still weak, but his instincts flared. He could see the truth. This was not just about the trials. This was about power, about those who would rather destroy tradition than accept him. The warriors charged, their blades glowing. James clenched his fists, ready to fight despite his wounds. But the princess raised her hand, and her guards moved forward in a flash. The clash of steel echoed across the arena. Blood was spilled, cries filled the air. In the chaos, James stood beside the princess. For the first time, they were not enemies. They were two figures bound together, standing against the storm. The princess glanced at him, her voice low. "Your trials are not over, human. Passing the law was only the beginning. Now you must survive what comes next." James nodded slowly, his eyes hard. He understood. The trials had tested him. But the real battle, the one for survival, for unity, for the future of two worlds, was only starting. The elder raised his staff once more, his voice struggling to rise above the chaos. Let be known across the stars. The bond of fate is sealed. The human and the princess are now one by law, and their path will shape the destiny of us all. The princess looked at James again, her silver eyes reflecting firelight. From this day forward, she whispered, you are mine, and I am yours. But remember, fate may bind us, but destiny we must carve ourselves. And with those words, the trial of heart ended. The bond of fate began, and the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath for what would come next. The arena still burned with the echoes of battle. Bodies of rebels lay across the black stone, their weapons shattered, their cries fading into silence. The loyal guard stood victorious, though many bore wounds. The trial was over, but the unrest had only begun. James stood beside the princess, his chest aching, his body weak, but his will sharp. He could feel the weight of thousands of eyes watching him, judging him. Half the crowd roared in support, hailing him as chosen by the law. The other half seethed in fury, refusing to accept a human as their princess's mate. The elder raised his staff once more, his voice breaking through the chaos. The law is fulfilled. The bond is sealed. Let none question it again. But James knew better. Law might silence words, but it could not erase hatred. He looked at the princess, and for a brief moment, he saw the truth in her eyes. They were bound, yes, but their path forward was dangerous. The princess stepped closer to him, her silver gown shimmering with the light of broken torches. Her voice was low, meant only for him. Do you understand what has happened, human? You're no longer just a visitor. You are a part of this empire now. My mate, my equal, but also my shield. James swallowed hard. He had come as an explorer, searching for knowledge. Now he stood as a symbol, a husband to an alien princess, a figure of law and legend. And behind the respect in her voice, he could hear it, the demand of survival. The elder's voice shook the air again. From this day, the princess and the human are bound. Together, they will guide our future. Together, they will face the storms yet unseen. The words carried across the arena, but shadows moved among the crowd. Whispers of rebellion spread like smoke. James could feel it. This was not the end. This was the beginning of a greater struggle. As the princess led him from the arena, he caught fragments of voices. He is unworthy. He carries courage. He will bring ruin. He may bring hope. The halls of the palace stretched before them, vast and endless. James walked beside her, every step echoing with the weight of fate. At last, when they were alone, the princess stopped. She turned to him, her silver eyes searching his face. You fought with courage. You solved what none could. You saved lives when you could have chosen yourself. But you must know this, James. The trials were not just for you. They were for me as well. James blinked, confused. For you? She nodded slowly. I wanted to see if you were more than a mistake, more than a fragile outsider bound by accident. And now, I see you're something else, something dangerous, something rare. Her voice softened. You are human, but in your heart, you carry a strength my people have forgotten. That is why they fear you. That is why they will not stop testing us. James let out a slow breath. He had survived trials, but now he realized the truth. The real test was living in a world that did not want him, and protecting the bond that tied him to her. He met her gaze firmly. Then let them test us. I didn't come this far to die on the floor of an arena. If I'm bound to you, then I'll fight beside you. Not because of your law, but because it's the right thing to do. The princess's lips curved into the faintest smile. For the first time, it was not cruel, not mocking. It was real, perhaps even hopeful. Outside, the city lights burned bright, but storms gathered beyond the horizon. Rebellion whispered in secret halls. Enemies sharpened their blades in shadows. And across the stars, Other empires would soon hear the news. A human had married an alien princess, and together they might change the galaxy. The princess extended her hand, her voice calm but strong. Then let our bond not be just law. Let be a promise to stand together against all who would tear us apart. James hesitated for a breath, then placed his hand in hers. The warmth of her touch surprised him, steady and unyielding. He realized then that their bond was no longer a prison. It was a weapon. It was hope. The elder's words echoed in his mind. Their path will shape the destiny of us all. James looked at the princess. The future was unseen, dangerous, filled with fire and shadows. But for the first time since stepping into the alien court, he felt something stronger than fear. He felt purpose. And as the torches burned, as the stars above shifted, the bond of fate became the bond of choice. The galaxy held its breath, for the story of the human and the alien princess was only beginning.